Okay, we are ready to begin our fourth and final plenary. Dr. Kiti Freier Randall is going to continue the conversation about children at risk, but now she's continuing the conversation on raising resilient children. So some of you said, wow, this was a lot of heavy information, but raising resilient children is the topic today. And she's going to talk to us now about how the church must become a village. I want to remind you that Dr. Freier Randall is a pediatric neurodevelopmental psychologist and a professor, and she's also the director of psychological services for the Department of Pediatrics at Loma Linda University Healthcare, and the medical director at Loma Linda in Loma Linda, California. All right, so without further ado, we're going to present to you again Dr. Kiti Freier Randall. Let's give her a hand.
I hope everyone had a good break, and now we're going to talk in terms of resiliency, not now about the risks, but instead about how the church must become the village for the child. And so what I want to start off with is just a reminder that there's no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. How we as a society, as a church, as a culture, as a world treat our children reveals our soul, it reveals how we think about our future. I want to start off kind of where I want to end off by telling you that I personally strongly believe that our church, a place which cares about our children, can be a place for prevention, first response, intervention, and trajectory change. The church can and must become the village that raises our children. So let's talk about resiliency. What is it? Resiliency is the capacity to maintain or develop competent functioning in the face of major life stress. It doesn't mean that we can remove all stressors from our children. What it means is, how do we help them to be competent when they face the stressors of this world? What we know is that it is not a trait, but it develops over time, and here's where we come in the picture. It develops in the context of environmental support. That's where we start knowing how we can weave in and make a difference in the trajectory and lives of children. I also believe strongly that it is never too early to start intervening on behalf of children, and it is never too late. But we must intervene by design. So I want to share with you the elements that we know help to develop resiliency in children. I'm going to cover each one of these facets. We're going to talk about knowledge and self-esteem, about caring others or nurturance that we need in relationship, about activity, a sense of belonging and spirituality, about service, and finally, about the role of family and the church community. So first, let's talk about knowledge. Knowledge or information-based prevention efforts are driven by the assumption that once young people know specific information, it will result in behavior change. We see this all the time. We use preaching, didactics, telling people what they should do. We're hoping that that will change behavior. But more and more, we have evidence to suggest that if you use information alone, it will not promote the behaviors you want, nor will it prevent the high-risk behaviors that we see in young children and adolescents. So although knowledge is essential, other elements are important if we're going to be effective in promoting the behaviors that we want and preventing high risk behaviors. Let me pause there and let's think about that, because very often our strategies are to tell people what to do, to use didactics, to use preaching. Let's pause and think about God. What if God used informations and programs alone? What if God had only preached? He knew it was not enough. He knew it required active, connected relationship, because God created us in a relationship to Him. He created us in His image for a relationship to Him. So He knew it would require a connection, and it required Jesus. So while information is important and helpful, it cannot be our only strategy if we are going to make a difference in the lives of the children or anyone. Self-esteem is our next one. So we talked about knowledge, now self-esteem. One of the most significant developmental tasks facing young people revolves around their sense of self or their identity, how they see their self-worth or their self-esteem. How we view ourselves impacts how we behave and the choices we make. If we know we are precious sons and daughters of God, we make different choices than if we have not, in our heart, understood that to be true. Our social environment is where we develop self-worth. We develop self-esteem from the love, the respect, and acceptance we get from others. Our sense of self is often derived from how we believe others think of us. How early does this happen? You know, when we think about the sense of self, if you look at it from a developmental perspective, often we're going to see things that talk about between the ages of 5 and 6, you start developing a sense of self. Now we realize it's much younger, and often we'll talk about 3 to 5. Well, there's a researcher in France named Philippe Rochat whose work was to look at when do we start realizing the difference between self and other. And he just spent time observing infant behavior. He watched babies. There's a reflex baby has. You know the reflex when you touch the corner of the mouth, the baby turns in that direction. They're looking for food. It's a survival reflex, right? You touch here and they turn for food. What he found in the first couple hours of life is that a baby will learn when they touch themselves not to root in that direction. When they touch themselves, they don't turn to that direction. That means the baby has learned self from other. That means from birth on, we know how other treats us. We already have a sense of self. Does other respond to our needs? Does other understand our cues? Does other understand our communication? That happens beginning at birth. If we want to know how to change trajectories, we need to be involved in our church community with babies on. Don't forget the little ones. In self-esteem, we must remember that we are a unique part of the image of God. Satan need only destroy that image in order to destroy God's plan for us. There is something I read some time ago that really struck me in regards to women. Prior to the time of creation on this world, the most beautiful creature in the world was Lucifer. The pinnacle of creation was woman. And so Lucifer's strongest attack is on women, and our sense of self is very entangled with how we look. Let us be careful to support that we are all princesses, daughters of God. and that our sense of self must come through that, and not how Hollywood or the world would lead us to believe. And so we see that self-esteem means that we need to really grasp that we are the unique part and image of God, and our young people need help in understanding that they have a purpose and sense of self in this world. The next factor is caring others. People who are sincere and want to give enduring relationships to children, this is a critical element that we must provide for young people. Parents, supportive adults, mentors, teachers, pastors, church family, they all contribute to the resiliency of young people. The presence in their life of a charismatic adult. The science shows that a person who young people can go to, no matter their problem, can gather strength that promotes their resiliency and results in behavior change. Caring others is a core element for prevention and resiliency. There was a study done years ago in the United States where they wanted to look at young people and determine which ones were on a positive trajectory and what factors put children at a negative trajectory. They looked across the United States, across ethnic group. They looked across geographical region, urban, suburban, rural. They looked at one-parent home and two-parent homes. They looked at whether there were resources in the community. The one thing that made a difference on whether you had a positive trajectory or a negative trajectory was whether you could identify a connected adult in your life, a healthy, connected adult. That's what made the difference, and we spent millions of dollars to find that out. And we need to know how important it is. In California, where we have high rates of gang violence, teen pregnancy, and high-risk behaviors in children, they studied 57,000 young people who had mentors that were part of mentoring programs. Do you see the rates of how many of them stayed in school, didn't join gangs, didn't start drugs? Over 90%. This is significant. I can't tell you what is exactly about mentoring, but what I can tell you, it's about an adult who starts developing a relationship with a child. One time I was on a flight and I met somebody who had started the mentoring programs for the elderly to work with young people. And what he told me was, make sure if you ever start a mentoring program, when you go see the adults, you don't tell them, I want you to become a friend of a child. They get too scared. He said, what you tell them is, this child needs you to help them with reading or writing just for 10 weeks. Can you just help them for 10 weeks with math or writing or reading or whatever it is? So you put a boundary on it so the person feels, okay, I can do that. But you know what happens in a couple weeks? A relationship develops. And guess who's going to their birthday? Or guess who's going to be for them? Or invite them to their home? So this is how we start making that difference. In medicine, we have an area of research called psychoneuroimmunology. It means psychologically, we've put the head on the body, and that psychologically, neurologically, and immunologically, we are one. Okay? And what we find in that medical research, that social support, human relationship, is the key to health and well-being. That caring others impacts your physical and mental health. Let me tell you a little bit. Secretaries with nice bosses have less heart disease than secretaries with not nice bosses. We have to be nice, people. You don't want to give people heart disease. Lonely people are twice as likely to die of a heart attack than those with social support. I had a very good friend who was visiting Chile. He had a heart attack there. He was doing work there, like what I do. And we all called him to let him know he's got social support because we knew his risk was high. And I need to tell you this, lonely doesn't mean that you're all by yourself. You can be amongst a lot of people and be lonely. We need to know that we're starting to develop relationships. People who go to church live longer than people who do not go to church on average because of the social support. Unless, of course, we have a church that's not supportive, right? So students, young people with social support do better academically. Young people with social support are less likely to do drugs. Do you see how important social relationship is? In the Bible, we have psychoneuroimmunology in Proverbs 17:22, where it says, "A happy heart is good medicine, and a cheerful mind works healing." This is key to what we need to be doing for others in our community. There was a study done by the top mental health professionals in the United States. They were asked, why are there so many children on mental health waiting lists in the United States? Why are so many children suffering, and what can we do about them? And that report from those 33 top professionals said that what children need for mental health and well-being is connectedness. They need a supportive adult, healthy adult in their life. That our brain is biologically primed for relationship. It means every area of development occurs in the context of relationship. Every area of your development occurs in the context of your relationship. There was a book written, a scientific book, that talked about how do we go from a brain neuron to being a productive member of our neighborhood and our society. And the conclusion of this 1,000-page book is that the single most important component of a child's healthy development is the presence of an enduring adult caregiving relationship. And this should be the family, but sometimes it's not. So we must be a family together. The next one is activity. I don't know if I'm the only one. When I was young, our parents said that idle hands are the devil's workshop, right? It's funny, it reminds me a lot of my grandfather, who was a very hard worker, and he looked at me one Sunday morning. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and he looked at me, and I was up, sitting up, and most everybody was still sleeping, and he looked, and my name in Latvian was Kato. And he said, "Kato, everybody remembers to rest the seventh day, but they forget it says 6 days shalt thou labor," right? Anyway, it always reminds me of him. But what we know is that when we are not busy in healthy activities, we are at risk for negative things. After school hours, from 3 till about 6, during the week, is the highest risk time for high-risk behaviors of children. More girls get pregnant in their own home after school than at any other time. This happens because they have left school, there's nothing to do, and there's no parents to supervise them. Well, I don't know the time in your culture, how things change. I know we did work in the Caribbean, and that time frame was after school till almost midnight because the parents were involved in tourism, having to work at hotels and so forth. So they had a huge gap of time that children didn't have healthy adults around them. In order to do prevention, we need to keep kids busy in healthy activities with adults who have values. This is your prevention. This is what your church can do. Keep kids busy in healthy activities with adults who have values. Let me tell you a story about Australia. Earlier I mentioned to you that Australia has had the highest rate of marijuana drug use in young people in the world. That was what we had in Australia. They also had the highest suicide rate of young people in the world. And so we needed to do something about it. There was several groups called in. I was part of one of those groups where we spoke to different parts of the government. And we said this: do you know the Australian government built roller skating parks in every town and city and village in Australia? You know what I'm talking about, where you go roller skating? Guess where the best place to get drugs is? The roller skating park. And so, true to how governments work, they were going to destroy or eliminate the roller skating parks. Was it a problem of the roller skating park? The problem was, where were the adults with values? And in fact, one town had turned it around. They had turned down on the risk. And our colleague, Jonathan Duffy, some of you might know him from ADRA, he let us know he was bicycling across Australia, and he let us know about one of those villages that turned it around because there was a parent in that town who had been a BMX bike racer, and he was at the skate park teaching the kids how to do their skating. And that town turned around the risk of those kids. My husband, who's a sports psychologist, tells me all the time that we forget about exercise, and that exercise is the most under-prescribed treatment that is effective for depression and other mental health issues. We need to help people move. We need to help get people moving. It makes a huge impact. And remember, I talked to you about risk factors of obesity, trauma, and technology. Exercise is one of the most important tools to combat that. And you wonder, why is trauma in there? Some of the main advances in trauma treatment today are to get young people to do movement, to learn different kinds of techniques of self-protection and to do movement. This is a key now for that. Faith communities can provide after-school activities, keeping the young people engaged in positive, meaningful pursuits. Faith communities can sponsor activities, physical activities, in venues that are attractive to our youth. We need to start thinking about that as we plan our church planning. What are the kinds of things that we can do to keep young people active? But can I make you a recommendation? Very often, we go back to our community and say, there should be no more technology, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't have this, they shouldn't do this. Please do not focus for the child on what not to do, but focus on what you want them to do. Focus on what you would like them to do, not on what you don't want them to do. Let's promote activities that they can engage in social, arts, sports, etc., and let's give them time in. Some people have asked, I talk about time in a lot, they've asked about that. What does that mean? It's not necessarily in opposition to time out, but think about it. Time out, the way I see it used, is you go in the corner and think about how bad you are, and when you come out, I want you to behave differently. And what I usually say to parents is, because they say timeout's not working. When the child has been put in the corner, and then they come out, or put in their room and they come out, what skill sets do you think they learned while they were there? Outside of getting angry and feeling sorry for themselves? If children can't behave the way we want them to, they don't need less time with us, they need more time with us. God doesn't say, go in the corner, and when you learn to behave the way I need you to behave, then come out and be my son or daughter. Never, never. He says, I want time in with you so that you can get my strength to live and behave the way that I need you to. The next thing is that we have the need for a sense of belonging. I said earlier, in French we say the raison d'être. We need a reason to be. That report that was done that said what children need is a healthy connection in order for mental health and well-being. It also says we need to have a sense of purpose in our world. More and more, we're realizing that young people need to have a sense of purpose in our church. They need to have a sense of belonging, that this is a family where they are wanted. Spirituality influences our well-being, and we need to have a sense of meaningfulness and purposefulness. One of those things that's being destroyed now is mealtime. I just wanted to bring a little example to you that family meals, just having a time together, gives a child a sense of purpose in that family, asking each other during mealtime how things are going. There was a project that was done that looked at the psychological well-being with eating meals together. Families that eat meals together, their children do better in school. Is that surprising? No, right? And we know that over 50% of teens who do not eat dinner with their parents have sex by the age of 15 or 16. That's reduced to 32% when they have family meals. Teens who have meals with their families are less likely to have suicidal thought or attempts and less likely to be suspended from school. Getting together, modeling good behavior, making a relationship, and having a sense of purpose in your family unit is key to your mental health and well-being. It makes me think of potluck. You know what? I have friends that sadly are no longer part of the church, but one thing they remember that they liked about church was potluck. We can use that meal together as a time of connection and support, a time when we show that we have a sense of community and a sense of belonging together. Let's make sure we do that. That children ministries, youth evangelism, family ministries, we must take into consideration the importance of making the church a place where young people can be appreciated and that we use their talents, that they have a sense of belonging in the church. My family's in rural Canada, and you know what? In many of our churches, there's less and less young people. There's so many of our young people who don't come to church anymore. And our church there, our little country church, was going to plant a garden to grow food for the food bank for the poor. It's a wonderful idea. But I said to them, please don't do it yourself. Go find the children of the neighborhood. There's a school right across the street. It's not an Adventist school, but it's full of children. Have them grow the food for the food bank. We need to start thinking about how to get children to be a part of it. The next one is service. Service learning is voluntary community service that's got a structured time where we prepare for things, we reflect, etc. But service learning, there is more and more in the literature that shows that if we do service, it improves our own mental health well-being if we serve others. And young people who do that, they also have that. It is not sure in research why service learning has such positive effects, but many schools now require it. I'm not talking Adventist or Christian schools, but schools in general, because it helps academically that they're requiring service learning. Participants, children who participate in service learning, start developing relationship with those who organize those events. They develop a sense of competency with their peers by able to do something for others. And they're heartened by their fact that they made a difference in this world for somebody else. This is a core issue in our heart, that we can make a difference for somebody else. We can have volunteers to be teachers' aides, to go in retirement homes or nursing homes. I remember as a child that we went to go and sing in nursing homes all the time. And it made your heart warm that you made somebody smile that day. They can help in daycare centers. They can help fix up parks or recreation areas. In Australia, they have a program called Stormco, where young people get together and go into regions where that community, that little town, might need help cleaning up, might need help in terms of organizing an event for the young people. These are young people going and doing these things. Sometimes they have an event in our community called Blue Jean Sabbath, that after church we change and we go and we do something for the community to make the community a better place. An important part of service activity is that increases your sense of belongingness so that you feel that you can give to others, and we receive the benefits when we do that. It also keeps kids busy with healthy adults. So this is important. So the family and church community, how do we play a role? I'm hoping that as I spoke, you saw in every one of those elements that the church can play a role in every single one of those elements, and that we can do that. But that report that said what children need, it's called Hardwired to Connect, what children need for mental health and well-being was connected adults and a sense of purpose. And their conclusion wasn't that we need more treatment centers. This was their conclusion, that they said to the government, what we need for the mental health and well-being of children in our country is we need communities that meet the need for connectedness, a community that is committed to one another over time and who will model and pass on what it means to be a good person and live a good life. Does that not say church to you? Does not that call to you as a church family to get involved? Yesterday, we heard from Dr. Barnar about the worldview and how we're losing God. If this is true about the parents in your community, you know that the church must become the community for the youth. The church must passionately look for ways to become the village to raise the child. We are losing our children. And the children of the world are struggling with all of those risk factors. As a church, we must look passionately, each one of us collectively, to be the village to raise the child. Family, women, and children's ministries that take these elements into account can and will make a difference for our youth today and the church's future tomorrow. We can and we will. Faith communities, if we're to reach the world, we know that faith communities have the history, they have the belief system, they have a core of volunteers. There's no other place you can go where you have people of all ages with so many different skill sets. We have an infrastructure that can provide all of the elements for positive trajectories for our young people. Once again, this is the key. Keep kids busy in healthy activities. With whom? Who have values. Positive, healthy adults. So, I don't know what the circumstances are in your community, in your culture, in your country, in your church. I don't know that. But I do know, and I once heard somebody who does leadership work. He goes into communities that are struggling, that have huge problems, into agencies that are struggling to survive, that have huge problems. And he said this was his advice. Never start thinking about how you are going to do something until everybody at your table, everybody in your church has already said, no matter the process, the answer is yes. Yes, we are going to do it. Yes, we are going to make a difference. Then, once everybody has bought in, you start thinking about the process of how you will do it. But don't start till everybody has agreed to give passionately and say, yes, we will make a difference in the lives of the children in our community. And that's what we're called to do. What children need for resiliency. These 3 things that children need for resiliency. When I have parents who come in and they come to me and say, you know what, we're having significant problems with our child, or there's huge risk factors, I always say these 3 things. What children need is routine, 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 routine. Because when they have that routine, they realize they don't have to worry about what comes next, and they can just focus on what it is they need to focus on. They need safety. All of those things we talked earlier this morning about without safety. They need boundaries. And they need nurturance. They need love. What they need is time in with us, healthy adults. Time in with our churches. Time in with relationship. Over time, science has validated what so many of us know is that people form and change people. It was in relationship we might have experienced adversity as young. If we are going to change the trajectory, we must then also give relationship. As I said earlier, all development occurs in the context of relationship, and children will act and react based on their relational experiences. We need to change our thinking. So often we exclude people who don't think like us or act like us. We exclude children who don't behave the way we want to. And we have to change from the concept of the bad apple to the concept of the bad environment or the bad barrel. There was a study done years ago by Zimbardo, and he took male college students, and he made half of them prisoners and half of them guards in a prison experiment to see behavior. He had to stop his study in 2 weeks because the behaviors that they took on as guards or prisoners became so negative. Was it because male college students were negative, bad behavioral? No, it was because of the environment they were put into. Our behavior is adaptive to the environment. We don't just tell people then to change. Our environments must change. Our church must become the environment, the change that we want to see in the world. We are commissioned to do this. That Hardwired to Connect report shows that there's scientific evidence that neuron regeneration, developing healthy pathways in the brain is possible given the right environment. That even a heritable vulnerability, something vulnerable from your gene pool, can be changed given the right environment. This is reason for optimism. This is why I know we can change trajectory. Because our families and our church, should they provide an improved social environment, can and will make a difference in the lives of children. We have to believe it, and we have to put our passion and our energy into that. Remember that unto the 3rd and 4th generation will be the sins of the father. But if you continue that verse, it says, but showing mercy and steadfast love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Do you see how we can reach the world? That even though we are plagued with the sins of our fathers, that through love, that trajectory can be changed. In Matthew 22, love the Lord your God with all your passion and your prayer and your intelligence. This is the most important, the first thing on any list. Change happens through the love of God. Remember that pyramid? Those negative things that will happen because of those risk factors. We know that we can change the trajectory. We can get children and people off of this triangle by healthy relationships with love and with God. Yes, our character is developed at a young age. Our decisions are informed at a young age, and pretty much everything is set by the time you're 13, just as was said. But with this, even an adult can change. Let me show you this. Relational wealth is a strong buffer of adverse childhood experiences. Remember those 10 things? Do you know if your score is 4, but you have positive, healthy social relationship, you have the risk factor of 1? Do you see how impactful relationship is in changing trajectory? Relational poverty, though, if your score is 0 and you do not have positive social support, you will have twice the vulnerability of a child with a score of 4. We must promote relational wealth. The church has a ton of persons willing to give healthy relationship. We have that. We can survive because we can love. And because we love, we can empathize. From the moment of conception to the end of life, we engage in a unique dance of connection. There's a book written by Dr. Bruce Perry called Born to Love, and the death of empathy in our culture. And we need to revive it because, yes, we can survive because we love, and we love because we can empathize. Relational interactions are the major vehicle for new learning. And the most effective way to get new learning or new behaviors into the brain is through relationship. Science is showing it. Something we've known is that relationships are what will change people. Remember, it is not the curriculum that teaches the child, it is the teacher. It is not the home that rears the child, but it is the relationship with the parents. It is not youth programs or church programs that will change the trajectories of young people. It is the youth leaders. It is the family leaders. It is leaders of our ministries that will change this. Remember I said, you have this already from earlier, I said that science is showing the most important component of healthy development is a caregiving relationship. God created us for relationship. God created man in his own image. The image and likeness of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So God created us in his likeness, and God is love. We were created for a relationship with him. The very reason we were created and why we live then is for relationship. We are social human beings who strive for a relationship with our Father. Poverty is not good, but it is the poverty of relationship that we should be focusing on. It is the most devastating. And this comes from the science world that is working with people with trauma, and as a church, we must embrace it and use our message. We have to be intergenerational, using all of the generations in our church. Young people grow to maturity in general and to maturity in Christ by being around people who have maturity themselves. The anthropologist Ruth Benedict criticized our cultures for excluding young people from responsibility, only then to blame them for their own irresponsibility. Remember, we must keep the child figural. We must make sure that they're supported, but understand responsibility. We mustn't weaken them. We must show that we believe in them, we support them, and we give them challenges that they can accomplish. But they then choose their behaviors and the responsibility that comes with the behaviors. We mustn't enfeeble our youth. Dr. Ben Carson, quite a long time ago, several years ago, had a sermon once where he talked about bears in the United States in the parks where everybody would feed the bears. And then the bears became entitled, and even if you didn't feed them, they wanted your food. And if they didn't get your food, they might hurt you to get your food. And that we had changed bears from scavenging hunting that bears should do to be entitled animals. And it was creating devastation. And it took years. The rangers in the park said something is wrong, and it took years to change the behavior of the bears, but it's taken even more years to change the behavior of the humans who feed the bears. And what we did was we enfeebled the bears from being true to what they were created to be, and it is what we do to children every day. Is we say, they cannot accomplish, they cannot do, they can't be responsible. Please do not enfeeble them. Do the balance of support and responsibility and help our young people move forward from the vulnerability of unto the third and fourth generation into the resiliency of the love to 1,000 generations. Sometimes we say it's impossible, but God will say, with me, all things are possible. This is God's time in with us. Sometimes we talk about our own ways of doing things. There was a slide that I skipped in the last one on procedural memory, and I just want to spend a minute or two on that. And it talks about how there's 3 types of memories that we have. We have episodic memory. We have memory that says, have you ever been here? Have you ever done this? Have you ever gone there? And yes, you can say, hey, I've now been to Budapest, or I've gone there, or I've gone to a meeting here, or this kind of thing. It's an episode. It's in your awareness. You can remember it. You can recall it. Then there's semantic memory. It's the memory of association and feeling where you can say, I have gone there. I met wonderful people there. I have a good feeling from it. Or you smell something and it reminds you of your grandmother's kitchen. And if she was a good cook, it's a good memory. If not, maybe it's not so good memory and you had to eat things you didn't want to eat. Whatever. It was an associative memory, a feeling memory. All of those are in your awareness. But our brains were created to be efficient. And in that efficiency, we have what's called procedural memory. And in our procedural memory, which is outside of our awareness, are all the things that were repeated over and over and over again, so they are just a part of our habits. They are just a part of what we do without thinking. So I could have you turn to the person beside you and teach them how to tie a shoe. It's hard to tell somebody how to tie a shoe, but you know how to do it. But it's already, the brain has said, hey, I got this. You don't have to think about it. We can do it automatically. So when you take something and you try to take something you do automatically and think about it, sometimes it's hard to do. What about walking? If you get up right now, do you know which foot you start off with? Do you know how you balance and you move? Look at little children. They think about it, right? They fall, they get up, they think, they work it out. What happens if you start thinking about how you walk? What will happen? You're clumsy, you could fall. Here's the key. If it's in your procedural memory, it's an automatic thing you do, whether it's good or bad. If you start thinking about it, it feels clumsy. It's difficult. It's hard to do. For many children who learned maladaptive behaviors, for many people who do things that are not healthy for themselves, you're asking them not only to change a behavior, but to change an automatic way of thinking and feeling in the world. And it can be clumsy. It can be difficult for them to do that. So you're not just saying, tell them don't do it anymore. You're changing the way the brain is working. You're changing the architecture of the brain. Okay? And so, as a result, we have to, all of these things got laid down. Now, it's not just how you move in the world, but how you think about your world. Remember I told you about the baby that turns and doesn't turn to their own? From infancy on, there are repeated patterns. If a baby cries and somebody responds what the baby needs, what does the baby learn? When I cry or have a need, I'm important enough to have somebody respond and address my need. But what if a baby cries and the needs are never met? What does the baby learn then? If over and over again I voice my need and it's not met. When I grow up, do I think that my opinion is valued, that my needs are important? I don't know what all the messages that young people or any of us have gotten, but if there's been repeated patterns, they are set down, and then by the time you're 3 years of age, 85% of your automatic response of how you think about yourself, how you think about others, and your worldview is already set by those repeated pattern experiences. And so, not only do children have those repeated patterns, and remember that when you have these repeated patterns that are set, that happen over and over again, they happen in the context of relationship. So how do we change it? How will you change? If it was laid down in relationship, how will it change? Only in healthy relationship. But not only do those we want to work with have patterned responses, each one of us do. Each one of us have our own procedural memories, our own pattern responses of how we think about the world, ourselves, and our worldview. And some of those may be healthy and do well. But we need to have relationships in our lives that help to guide us to make sure that we do healthy things and that we impact our world in a healthy way. And that guidance comes particularly from above. He gives us others in our world to make that message known, but it comes in connection to Him. So if we are doing things over and over again and they're not making the difference that we need it to make, we need to rethink this. We need to re-look at it. Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing tomorrow what you do today and expect different results. We have a call to change. If we as individuals, if we as churches, if we as a world church continue to do things that are not engaging our young people, we must look at our own collective and individual procedural memories and have a call to change. We must look at what their needs are, meeting young people where they are at, meeting women where they are at, meeting families, meeting everyone where they are at, and understanding how is it that we can do these prevention and resiliency things and change the trajectory. But if we continue to do today, tomorrow, and expect it to be different, it will not happen. we have a call to change. So to reach the world, God provides all the elements needed to help others, to change trajectories, but we must be grounded in Him. We must be grounded in Him. And yesterday, Dr. Barnard said, you cannot give what you do not have. To live like Christ involves embracing our own weakness and relying on His strength. Each one of us, I know, we're on that journey together. We each have our own weaknesses. We need to embrace Him and His strength and embrace each other as a family to say, let us help each other to find creative ways to passionately reach the world and change the lives and the trajectory of those in it. So, to reach the world, remember, a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. Okay? Take a step at a time. Be strong and courageous, and let's get to work. And my favorite from my friend's grandmother, God cannot steer a parked car. We must go into gear and start driving. I heard this beautiful sermon once, and it was called on how do you wait upon the Lord, watch for His direction, and continue the walk. And you know all three must occur at once. We cannot sit idly, but we must wait upon Him as we do so in conscious thought of what we are doing by design. Remember, to reach the world, there are three things that will endure: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. This is what we have. This is the hope we have. This is the message we have to change the world. And we will make that difference. So, let us be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I don't know your journey. I don't know your mission. I don't know where you have to go, but I know that each of you have a mission. Each of you have a purpose, and that collectively we can work together to change this world. The other thing I know is that sometimes, I know it probably as well as you do, that sometimes the journey is tough. That sometimes it's hard, and sometimes our efforts aren't always appreciated. I say to my students all the time, if you're going into pediatric psychology because you want kids to thank you, then you need to stop. You might have that, but you're going into it because you have a gift and a passion to help the children. And to remember that if you stay connected in Him and you give the precious gift of His life flowing out through you, it is not cheapened by the response that you get from the world. We are called to do things that will not be popular in our world and in our communities. I can tell you now that when I advocate for children and I say things about what they need, I am not often the most popular person. I've had parents tell me, "You're not making me feel very good." And I say, "I'm sorry, but my role in life isn't about making you feel good. It's about getting us together on the same team to do right by your child." So remember, if God had sent His Son, and the gift of His Son had been valued by how the world responded to His Son, how horrible would that be? How horrible that would be. The gift of His Son, the gift of Jesus to the world, is not cheapened by the response of the world, and neither is the gift of you cheapened by the response that you get in your work. I love this African proverb. It's one of my favorite. And it encourages me sometimes, and I'm encouraging you, that if you think you're too small to make a difference, you try sleeping in a room with a mosquito. And I know some of you know what that's like, because I know what that's like. And so I admonish you, let us all here today commit to be the mosquitoes of our church. We will be the mosquitoes of our community. Let us become the mosquitoes in the world. So to reach the world, there's a rallying cry for adults to step forward, to build this new generation as the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face, O God of Jacob. To reach the world, we must, all of us, unite as a church family, supporting the families, equipping parents, and spending time with the children. This is what will change us to be able to effectively reach the world. Margaret Mead is inspirational, and she provides this quote: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, because indeed it is the only thing that ever has." And we are more than a few thoughtful, committed citizens in this room. Let us go to our respective areas and do that. Let us change the world. I want to end with a poem that was written for me by one of my really good friends who knows the work that I do and the children that I work with. And I want to share this with you just before we end. It's called Act Qualified. Not what can be done, but what can I do for the child that's courted by gangs? Not what will she eat, but let me feed her, the little girl with hunger pangs. Not, oh, that boy, he needs guidance, but I'll mentor the one that's headed towards guns and drug use. Not, oh, her mother's just like that, but can I step in and break the cycle of child abuse? Don't say that you care and do nothing and defer to those more qualified, for each time you put off your duty, a child who needs saving has died. You see, action is all that is needed, and love is the best qualification. Don't ask who will save today's children, but act now and be a child's salvation. I wanted to end today with a song, because I'm always inspired by music that gives me some energy to move forward. And so I'd like to call my friend Douglas to the front. And we sang this song yesterday together in children's ministries. And I found it very inspiring, and so I asked if he would come and help, since I don't know all the words either, but he would come and help lead out this song together, that we might sit here and commit ourselves to act qualified and be a child's salvation.
Right? There are some few things which I have to teach you.
Speak at the microphone.
Oh, I use signs. Okay. There are some few things which I have to teach you. Just basic sign language, right? We are here together, you and me. We are brothers and sisters. One big family. Easy. Again. We are here together. You and me. We are brothers and sisters. One big family. Now we are going to sing. We are here together, you and me. brothers and sisters, one big family. Let's go, everyone. We are here together, you and me. We are brothers and sisters, one big family. We are here together, you and me. We are brothers and sisters, one big family. One big family.
Thank you, brother. Don't forget the admonition that I know that as a church we can be the village that will raise the children, and please be the mosquito in your home, in your church, and in your family.
May I invite you for a word of prayer? To stand up. ربنا وإلهنا السماوي القدوس، نتقدم إليك يا رب بقلوب مليئة بالشكر من أجل كل نعمك وبركاتك العظيمة التي تغدقها علينا، من أجل هذا المؤتمر ومن أجل القائمين عليه، ومن أجل الفرصة التي أتحتها لنا أن نأتي من جميع أنحاء العالم يا رب، كيما نتعلم أشياء جديدة، كيما نشارك يا رب الأخبار السارة، وكيما نشارك المعرفة. ساعدنا يا رب أن احنا نشارك رسالة محبتك ورسالة خلاصك مع جميع أصدقائنا، أخواتنا وأخواتنا يا رب حول العالم، من جميع ومختلف الجنسيات والثقافات واللغات. ساعدنا يا رب أن احنا نكون سبب بركة للآخرين. يا رب نشكرك على نعمة الأطفال، هذه نعمة عظيمة يا رب. ساعدنا أن احنا نكون سبب بركة لأولادنا. ساعدنا يا رب أن احنا نكون مثل وقدوة ليهم، وأن احنا نربيهم في طريقك أنت، كيما يكونوا أولاد ليك، كيما يكونوا هم مستقبل الكنيسة يا رب. يا رب بنطلب منك طلبة خاصة من أجل الأطفال الذين يعانون حول العالم. هناك الكثير من المشاكل يا رب، مشاكل الحروب ومشاكل المجاعات والفقر والجهل والعنف، الكثير من المشاكل التي يعاني منها الأطفال. ساعدنا أن احنا نكون سبب بركة ليهم يا رب. ساعدنا أن احنا نمد إليهم يد العون ويد المساعدة كيما يكونوا أولاد ليك يا رب. نسأل هذا دائما في اسم من فدانا على عود الصليب، آمين. You may be seated.
Thank you very much. For those of you who are wondering, that was Arabic. Thank you very much, Amal Fawzi, our Director of Family Ministries. I believe she also does children's for the Middle East and North Africa Union. We want to thank Dr. Kiti Randall for her wonderful presentations. Please help me thank her.